Hello and welcome back to the Laurnie Wilson Show. I am so excited to be recording this second episode today because we're going to talk about a topic that is very near and very dear to my heart, which is how we don't need to make a big deal out of everything. Shocking, I know. But this is something that's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks, especially as I have personally started to notice the way that I really respond to certain events that happen or certain experiences that I go through. And I've started to ask myself, okay, why am I responding in this way? So that's really the basis for where this conversation is coming from. And we're going to be talking about things like perfectionism and doing the most. We're going to be talking about self-worth because it always goes back to self-worth in some way or another. And I hope that you'll find this useful and also a really great generative conversation for you to reflect on yourself, your own behavior, and the ways that you want to show up in your life as you really live a life that you love. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So as I had mentioned, the way this idea for this conversation came to me was really in thinking about the way that I've been responding to things in my life, like just daily things. And I started to notice that I was making things kind of a big deal and taking things kind of personally. And so I sat back and I asked myself, well, where is this coming from? What's actually going on here? Look, I'm a hypnotherapist. I can't help but to ask questions and dig a little bit deeper when I notice a pattern, you know? So something that I was able to realize is that a lot of this behavior feels very much like a strain of perfectionism. What do I mean by that? So when I talk about perfectionism, I am thinking about the kind of behavior that we do where we really feel that we need to do the most. We hold ourselves to extremely high standards, often impossible standards, where we have to meet various conflicting needs all at once. Often it involves putting your own needs last in order to please something or someone outside of you, and having a really strong negative reaction to disappointment, things not going as planned, plans changing, plot twists, all of those things. So if any of that rings true for you, if any of that sounds like something that you yourself have experienced in your life, then it's possible that you are also or have also been navigating with some element of perfectionism. Now, the curious thing about perfectionism is that it shows up in really different ways. Now, for some people, when they have these perfectionist tendencies, what happens is that they really go into overdrive. They try and literally get everything done, do the most, check all the boxes, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, you know the deal. And then there's other people who their perfectionism actually leads them into almost a paralysis because they want to do so well and they don't want to mess up. And they're so repulsed by the idea of failure that they just don't even try. And so they take a long time to make any decisions, to make any movements because they have these expectations for themselves and they're worried that they're not going to meet them. And there's probably like a scale of perfectionist behavior, and what I described are just two kind of polar opposite ends. I found that I fall into the former of like trying to do the most. And you may find that there's certain elements of perfectionism that you experience in one part of your life, and there are certain parts of perfectionism that you experience in other parts of your life. I think this can happen. We're really fluid as humans, right? We can have conflicting experiences of the same experience. So it could be useful to start thinking, okay, does any of this ring true for me? And really start to trace that back and say, well, when did I start having this behavior? Now, for me, when I started tracing it back, I could really see that this has been going on since I was a child. I have always wanted to make sure everyone around me was happy. Ever since I was little, I remember really wanting to make sure that I didn't do anything or say anything that was going to be controversial. You know, even adults, and this is so weird to reflect on this, but I remember adults even like complimenting me for being so politically correct in the ways that I would answer things or navigate things, which is so wild when you think about someone like describing a child in that way. I'm like, 8 years old. But it goes to show you just how much the perfectionism, like I had really embraced that and embodied that. And that belief that I needed to make sure that I was perfect really fueled a lot of my behavior. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think that it's wrong to have high standards for yourself. I don't think that it's wrong to have high expectations or high hopes or dreams. I think what we're talking about here is really when we take any of those standards or expectations and put them into the extreme, to the point that we are neglecting our own needs and our own voice, our own intuition, our own well-being in favor of these standards that we've placed on ourselves, or maybe that society, community, etc., maybe has placed on us. I think there's a wide range of experiences you could have had here with why you may have had perfectionist tendencies growing up or as an adult. And so it was really illuminating for me to say, okay, well, yeah, I can see where this came from. I can see that I know from a young age, that was so important to me. And it's important when you are reflecting for yourself that we do so through this real lens of compassion and self-acceptance. Because it's really easy to look back on our younger selves and be like, oh my gosh, they knew nothing. What were they doing? Like, I can't believe it. Like, ugh. And to then feel bad about it. But that's never the point of reflecting, right? So anytime that we're having a conversation here and I'm saying, hey, consider what your behavior was in the past, I want you to remember to do that in a really kind way, in a really self-compassionate and loving way, because you deserve that. And it's important to remember that you have always been doing your best. 8-year-old you was doing the absolute best that 8-year-old you could do. I guarantee. And now, a couple decades later, you might know something different. And that might change the behavior that you have. But it doesn't mean that 8-year-old you was wrong or bad. It's so important to remember that. This is a whole tangent I could obviously have an entire podcast on. But I will move on to the next thing that I wanted to say about that, is that the reason that we have these behaviors and these adaptations of our behaviors over time is because on some level they work. So this is why we need to be compassionate, or we don't need to be, but I would encourage you to be compassionate with yourself, is that you are so brilliant in that you're always finding the simplest thing that works. And really, I should put simple in air quotes here, because your subconscious always wants to keep you safe, always wants to keep you alive. And so if as a child you found that making things easier, and I'm putting that in air quotes, for other people made things easier for you, then you were going to do that. And you didn't know at the time that over time, ultimately that behavior was potentially going to lead you to burnout, to a lack of boundaries, to relationship dynamics that really don't serve you or suit you or support you. You didn't know that back then. You just integrated this belief on a subconscious level and then continued to act out that belief. And when you are doing that, you're getting through whatever it was, but then we get to go back and say, okay, what's actually going on here now? And one of the ways that I see this perfectionism, this doing the most, this making everything a big deal, one of the ways that I see this show up is in our relationships. So the real irony here about making things a big deal is that we often think that in order to make things easier for other people, we need to make sure that they don't feel that anything is a big deal, that they're not inconvenienced, that they don't know that they, haven't given us what we needed, et cetera, et cetera. And so we want to make things not a big deal for other people. But in doing that, we end up making things a really big deal for ourselves, which is extremely exhausting, extremely unsatisfying. And over time, that can really lead you to such deep burnout. And I also think a sense of hopelessness and isolation in thinking that you have to navigate everything on your own. And the way that I see this in relationships as adults is, for example, in a romantic relationship, there could be someone, the person who has had these perfectionist tendencies, who, doesn't want their partner to be inconvenienced, might not express their feelings, might not let their partner know when they need support. And over time, in turn, then that leads to resentment, right? Because the person who is struggling is not getting the support that they need, but they're not getting the support that they need because they think their behavior is actually keeping the relationship together, but it's actually causing resentment, which is probably leading the relationship into not being a relationship anymore. You see what I mean? And so in this way, we get ourselves into these loops and these cycles and these dynamics where, because we are operating on this old programming of needing to take care of things by ourselves, not inconvenience people, not let people know that we have opinions about things, et cetera, et cetera. Because we have these old beliefs, they are finding their ways into the relationships often that matter the most to us. And that is really what I want us to consider here. Like, how are we letting our old belief systems about what we need to be doing on our own and managing on our own? How are we allowing our old belief systems around how we navigate disappointment or lack of perfection? How are we letting all of that impact our most important relationships? It can be scary to realize that you don't have to go through a difficult emotional experience on your own when you have been doing that for decades. It is extremely vulnerable to open yourself up to allow someone else to support you when you have a need. I know that. But the best relationships in our lives, whether that is a romantic relationship, whether that is a friendship connection that you have, whether that's someone in your family, a sister, a parent, or anyone else, those relationships don't really succeed, or they're not really fulfilling for us if we're not able to be vulnerable. And really, any kind of intimate, close, deep relationship requires us to not be in it alone. But so many of us are in our most intimate relationships alone. And that honestly breaks my heart because it doesn't have to happen. Now, I'm not saying that you deciding that you don't want to repress your feelings in favor of someone else will mean that you can stay in the same relationship dynamics that you have. Let me be clear. The relationship dynamics that you have are based upon the behaviors that you have exhibited in the past that have led you to this point. So when you decide, oh, actually, I want to be able to be supported. Actually, I want to be able to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be vulnerable. I want to be my full self. If you have been hiding that full self and repressing that full self and telling that full self that they're not welcome here, then the other person's desire to be in this relationship is built off of that, right? Like, it's built off of the person that you've shown up as thus far. And so that means there may be some painful disillusions that happen here. There may be some painful dissolving of connections as you decide that you want something different. Not everyone is going to evolve with us. That is the truth. And I was going to say that's sad but true, but it's actually not sad. It's actually amazing. It's amazing that not everyone is going to evolve with us because they don't need to. They're on their own journey. You are on your journey. And some people will evolve with you. When you decide that you are going to allow people into your life, some people will be so excited about that. They've been waiting for this moment where you realize how amazing you are. And some people are going to be like, oh, I don't want this. Unsubscribe. You know? And that's okay. There's billions of people in the world. And a lot of the time, what I think happens when we are nervous about being vulnerable or letting someone into our lives or no longer doing the most, no longer being the perfectionist, trying to be, the person holding the strings, orchestrating everything behind the scenes, we worry that the people in our life are going to leave us, that they're not going to be okay with who we are now that we're really allowing ourselves to be shown. And you know what? That's not an incorrect thing to be aware of. Like, be aware of that. Some people are not going to go along for this ride, but there are so many people in the world. The people who will want to come along for this ride are going to be able to find you so much easier the sooner that you decide to be yourself. It actually makes me emotional to think about this. Like, you don't have to hide. You don't have to pretend to be a person that you don't want to be. And it really doesn't matter how long that you have operated in this way. It doesn't matter how long you've told yourself, oh, I actually am not allowed to have support when I'm going through something. Actually, it's better if I just get through this myself. It doesn't matter how long you've told yourself that. You can choose today to tell yourself something different. That is the beauty of being a human and having such an amazing brain, is that our brains are so elastic. We can choose a new belief anytime. And the sooner you choose that belief, the better. I mean, frankly, because I know you don't want to keep being unsatisfied. I know that you don't want to keep being in these dynamics that are not serving you, where you're not allowed to be who you are. And so, yes, this might require you having some courage, because you're going to want to explore, right? Is this a dynamic that I can stay in as I become myself more and more? Or is this a dynamic that I'm going to need to put behind me? So some courage may be required. I will not beat around the bush about that. Courage and bravery are some of the biggest qualities that we need when we are going through an internal subconscious transformation. But you know what? You have it. You maybe just haven't exercised it that much. You, I know, are innately courageous and brave. In order to get to where you are in this moment, you had to have a lot of courage and a lot of bravery and a lot of resilience. And so you have everything that you need. And making a change where you decide, like, okay, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to no longer prioritize other people to the detriment of myself. I'm going to really show up and ask to be seen. And if those around me are not here for that, I'm going to let them go. That's big. That is some big, big work. But it is also the work that will lead you to the life that you want. You cannot get to the life that you want surrounded by people who do not support that for you. You can't do it. It's impossible. Because everything that you take in is going into your subconscious. So if you are around people who are constantly reaffirming this idea that they are not going to be able to support you or be there for you or see you or show up for you, then you are continuing to tell yourself that that is your life and that is who you are. And you don't have to be that way. That doesn't have to be your life. You're allowed to have people around you who support you and love you and want the best for you. You're allowed to have people around you who think that you are amazing. You are allowed to have people around you who are your biggest cheerleaders. But that does require that you trust yourself to take those steps. I did not know that we were going to go there, but I'm really glad that we did, because I want you to know this. I want you to have these tools. I want you to realize that you can make a change anytime, and you really get to choose who you allow into your life. So let's end it here for now. It's so funny. I write notes for what I want to talk about, and this went on a totally different tangent, but I think it was important. I think that it obviously was a message that needed to come through, and the reminder that I know that you needed this week, today, whenever you're watching this, whenever you're listening to this. If I could give you one thing to think about moving forward, I really want you to consider, who are you letting into your life? Why are they here? Are they supporting you in the way that you desire to be supported? And what do you want out of the relationships that are in your life? How do you want to feel in the relationships that you have? And I don't just mean romantic relationships. I'm very clear. If I'm speaking about romantic relationships, I will say that. But I really am opening this up because all of our relationships inform how we feel about ourselves. And you've probably heard the saying that, like, the 5 people you spend the most time with are a representation of you. And so that actually might be a really interesting take-home exercise, is to consider, who are the 5 people that you spend the most time with? And what are those relationships reflecting about you? And is that reflection the reflection that you want to be seeing of yourself? Or are there some tweaks and changes that you would like to make? I will actually leave it here for now. I think I've said that before, but we're actually going to close it down now. Thank you so much for being here. I love getting to dive into these topics with you, and there's really so much more to explore here. So feel free to reach out. You can either leave me a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. Let me know what you would like to hear me speak about next. What are some topics that you want us to move through together from this perspective of hypnosis, the subconscious, this journey that you're on of living a life that really speaks to you, that really lights you up. And take good care of yourself. I'll see you very soon. Bye.